Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. We are really excited about today's podcast because we have two wonderful district leaders, and both are doing really important work. And we can't wait to talk with them about that important, exciting work.
Absolutely. So we have Jean here from Fairfax County Public Schools, and really excited to show the work that they're doing with adopting new curriculum. And so it's exciting because Jean is in the process right now with her district of adopting a new curriculum, and fun to hear about the work that they are doing at the moment. And then we also have Janise, who we've had on before, but it's been a long time. She was one of our first guests. And Janise,
we're happy that she's still friends with us after all this time. 100 podcasts later, and Janise is a returning guest.
Yes. And Janise was our fearless leader in Baltimore when we went through the adoption process. So she has a lot of experience to share, as well as has seen a lot of other districts and what they're doing. So they'll share more about themselves. So we'll start with Jean. Can you tell us a little more about who you are and your district?
Sure, absolutely. So hi, everyone, and thank you for letting me be part of this today. So excited to be here. My name is Jean. I am one of the elementary education specialists for elementary language arts in Fairfax County, where I manage professional learning for our district. And Fairfax County is a large district. It's in Fairfax, Virginia, and it's I think the 10th or 11th largest district in the nation. Wow. So undergoing this change is really exciting. And, from a systems perspective, a bit unique because we're so large.
Well, you're on the right podcast because we have Janise, who was the leader of a very large district.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. So great to be back. Melissa and Lori, thanks for having me. It's always admired the work you do, was privileged enough to work alongside you, and now get to continue to follow the amazing leadership that you've taken with your podcast. So thanks for having me back. Can't believe it's 100 episodes later. I feel like we should break into like Golden Girls. Thank you for being a friend in honor of Betty and everything for 100 right now. So I often feel like I'm 100, but I'll go back to that a little later. I spent 11 years of my career in Baltimore, 7 of those years as the executive director of teaching and learning. And had the great privilege to work with amazing leaders, teachers, students, really the best folks in the work, and got to learn alongside of those folks while we brought in HQIMs, high quality instructional materials for both math and literacy, and we're beginning to engage deeply in that work in science. And during that time, got to also do some national work with some colleagues at Curriculum Matters and really work elbow to elbow with other leaders taking on this change management work. I left that work in July and really started exploring that passion of how do we explore deeper work, across other partners and different pieces, and was honored to join Amplify family. So I am currently the regional vice president for partner success.
And we couldn't be more excited for you because I feel like you were so amazing in Baltimore, and I'm just so happy that you found a fabulous place to land. And even though I wish you were still, with us, we are very thrilled that you have a wonderful new home.
Thank you so much. I feel like all of us that are in the HQIM world are all sisters in that work, sisters and brothers in moving equity for kids. So thank you.
Yes.
Yep. We all have the same goal, right?
That's right.
Yep. We're I always say that we're literacy BFFs.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So, Jean, do you want to tell us a little bit more? I know you just gave us a little hint at what's happening in Fairfax County, but tell us a little more about the curriculum landscape. Like, where have you all been? Where are you going? What's happening right now? What's happening soon? Let us know what's going on.
Yeah, those are really great questions. So Fairfax is in a really exciting time right now where we have the opportunity to make some shifts and some changes and adopt high quality instructional materials. And so typically Fairfax County has had homegrown curriculum where we've had folks in our district office who have written our curriculum and teachers have used it and implemented it in their classrooms. Pardon me. And what's been great is it's allowed teachers to use their creativity. It's allowed teachers to be really responsive to their students. And what we've found, though, from a district level is that across our 143 elementary schools, different schools were doing different things. And when we think about equity, we want high quality instructional materials for all students, no matter where you are, no matter what zip code you're in. And so there were some schools that started adopting foundations, letters, and then there were some schools who didn't, and they were using that to supplement the curriculum that we were putting out as a district.
Sounds familiar, Janise, huh?
It sounds like repeat, right? It sounds like the great work that I'm so thrilled to hear, Jean, the deep reflection that you all are doing around what are the current successes, right? You also aren't throwing everything out, but really thinking about how do you take the strength of your district and make a decision and even empower teachers more by level setting and ensuring that everybody has those high quality materials.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as a district, we've started developing an equitable access to literacy plan. Not developing, we're in the process of implementing it at this time. And, like the rest of the country, really, we noticed that our outcomes weren't.
I'm wondering, Dean, what is in the equitable access to literacy plan? Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So the Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, we are on version 3.0. It started version 1 with one of our really incredible education specialists who started noticing that why aren't we, like there seemed to be some things that were missing. Mm-hmm. And so we were hearing from community stakeholders and we were hearing from, principals and teachers, like, what do we do for our word study, instruction, and our kids can't spell and we're noticing our kids aren't reading. So what we did was we started crafting this plan and thinking about what the outcomes are that we wanted. And so we were like, we want all students to be able to read no matter what, like no matter where they live, no matter what school they go to. And we want them to have access to these high quality instructional materials. So we thought, big picture, like what are the things that we need to do to make sure that this happens? Well, we definitely need to make sure that we're adopting high quality instructional materials. We also need to make sure that our teachers understand why we're adopting those high quality instructional materials and build their knowledge, because there are certain things that, they may not have had an opportunity to learn in school, like in college. Time has passed for a lot of them. And so what do we need to do to build their capacity and help them, give them the tools so that they can be successful in making sure that all their students can read?
I think that's just so critically important too. When, when you think about vision setting, so many districts as they embark on the work can say what they mean, but to codify it and actually capture it so that stakeholders understand the movement, because we all know when we're doing change like this, it's not just about bringing in materials and training and then moving forward. There's a lot of mindset work and a lot of engagement work. So ensuring that folks know why we're doing the shift and why we're doing the change, I think is so important. And Jean takes me back to those memories when I was director of literacy, and we'd have to go share our results and talk to cabinet. And it felt like a kick in the stomach every time you looked at the data because it was so predictable. We knew, MOY data was going to say this, but we couldn't say why things weren't moving. Because again, we had really smart people working, really hard and dedicated teachers. But what we noticed in Baltimore with our homemade curriculum through an audit process was that we were actually unintentionally creating gaps, because when we built it, we were doing the best we could, but we didn't think about vertical alignment, knowledge building, vocabulary depth, all of those pieces that we now know so much more about. And I think it goes to that point of really understanding the science. And I don't just mean the science of reading, right? That's a component within that, but really understanding how things change and what we know from research, what we know from practice. And, you hear so many people say, that parallel structure to, you would never go to a doctor who was doing the same things they did in 1980 without changing anything. So, I think as district leaders and as folks that, as you said it, are literacy BFFs, we should be pushing each other into the research to constantly study what's happening. How do we use continuous improvement to really drive, are we getting the outcomes we're intending for? And we can't get to any of that if we don't have a plan to start with.
Yeah. So good. I'm thinking about when we were in Baltimore, the one thing that really helped me see the power of high quality materials and deeply understand the science of reading and the critical importance of knowledge building were the high quality materials, because it was the first time I had seen in action all of those things, coming together, and I could see the different components and how they addressed it. I'm wondering, Jean, I know that you're on the search right now. You're in that exploration period. What's happening for you all right now? I'm sure that you're kind of setting everyone up for that, but would you mind giving us a little overview about what's happening in your district right now to prepare for that onset of high quality materials? So like laying the foundations for the science of reading, but then also planning for the adoption process?
Yeah. So there's two pieces there. So there's planning for the adoption process, and then there's also the professional learning and getting our teachers prepped. So I'll talk first about the adoption process, and then I'll talk about what we're doing with the professional learning. So we are currently going through an RFP process. And for those of you that don't know what RFP, it means request for proposal. And that's how we get these high quality instructional materials. And I think if I could just add this little anecdote, what I wish everyone knew about the RFP process that I didn't know was we can't just go out and say, we want that high quality instructional material. Like, that's the one that we want. It doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of input from a lot of different stakeholders. And that's critical because you're spending millions of dollars to get this high quality instructional materials into the hands of teachers to support our students. And that's also taxpayer dollars. So we want to make sure that we're including everyone. So the process starts out where we get this landscape. We send out a survey to teachers. What's going on? What do you need? What's happening? And so that survey went out. I want to say in 2019. And and from there, we were able to build the requirements of what it is that we want in a high quality instructional material, like what the feedback from the teachers, what are they saying that they need? We're seeing we need stuff for, for phonics instruction, for word study instruction. We need these materials. And so, and also considering, like you were saying, Janise, all the information that we know about evidence-based instruction and knowledge building and doing what's best for kids and aligning our curriculum with evidence-based practices. So once the requirements are set, they send out a request for proposal. So all of the publishers are like, if we meet these requirements, we're going to apply. And they send us samples and they tell us how they're meeting all of the requirements. And then a committee gets together and looks. And so they look at, okay, does this resource actually meet the requirements? They said that they did, but let's go through and dig and see. And so that kind of splits off, because something that I didn't know about this process that was really eye-opening to me was there's the content piece. Like, is this good content? But then there's also this whole technical side where you look at student privacy and is it compatible with the resources that we use in the county? Like, we use Schoology. So that was really interesting. You don't think about that. You think, like, is this aligned with what we want? And then another thing that we look at too is thinking about our teachers, right? Like, workload. I mean, we know that teachers are probably the hardest working individuals in any profession. And I might just add in, like, the teachers in Fairfax County are awesome. And, you know, we have to look at, is this high quality instructional material something that our teachers can use and implement within their contract hours and their contract time? Because if it's not, then it's something that we need to think about and
Jean,
consider.
can I pause you for a moment?
So
First, I'm super excited. I feel like we need to have a whole nother podcast called What I Wish Everyone Knew About the RFP Process. That's on point. The second thing, I just want to do a quick little summary, is that you're really talking about the triangulation between content, logistics, and people, right? So you're thinking about in that process more than just what it seems. Am I hearing you right? Is there, when you think about, does this resource meet our criteria, right? That is, so those buckets are what you're considering. Is there anything that if you had to, like, press pause right now and give a piece of advice to someone listening, like someone is in your seat right now, what would you say to them? Like, I am knee deep in this. What's your best advice?
Oh my gosh, that is such a hard question.
We can also pause and turn it over to Janise for a minute.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure.
I don't know about you, Janise, but when Jean was talking, I was like, this brings me right back to our RFP days.
Absolutely. That's
so
for
I know,
sure.
Janise, you had anything to add about similarities or things that were different in Baltimore or other counties?
Absolutely. I think in that triangulation that Lori just framed out, I think sitting central in the middle is context. So, you know, district context matters so much. So I know I mentioned having a vision, having a strategy. And as Jean said, you know, Baltimore followed almost every single one of those steps. I think one thing that was really outstanding that happened with the committee work in Baltimore was before we ever got into the process of unpacking materials, you know, starting to do the rubric analysis and looking at both those content and operational and technical pieces, we spent a lot of time training those folks. And when I say training, I mean really norming around what do we want. So we had done very similar. We had done engagement surveys. So teachers, stakeholders, parents, community members really told us what they wanted in the curriculum. We also did engaging sessions where people could come out and meet people from district office and really talk about those pieces. So we were able to, you know, get in a room that was back pre-COVID, when we were in a real room and we could have things hanging around the room that said, teachers want this, parents want this, students want this. And so really just continuing to ground. We also brought in leading experts like David Lieben. We leveraged hard ed reports. We brought in folks from ed reports to talk to the team about how those analysis documents, those reports that they created were built. What were the components within them? What was that, you know, evidence-based science behind the work? We brought in Nell Duke to help folks understand how to go to other research organizations to study the work. And so we spent, you know, a great deal of time investing in that, which was great because for us in Baltimore, we had a principal who engaged in that process with us. You know, we had teachers, we had principals, we had district office. And one of the things the principal came back and said was, this is so different. You know, she had been in the district a number of years from the previous RFPs I've ever engaged in. So, you know, and right when we started that work, we started communicating it outward. So we did some things like Facebook Live sessions with our CAO at the time, and really started talking about why are we doing this work, right? And I think that point Jean made about not only is it tax dollars, right? But you have to be fiscally responsible because it's not like you have dollars to buy a new curriculum every 2 years. So when you're jumping into something this deep,
That's true.
especially with a district as large as Fairfax, Baltimore, really any district, right? You have to be fiscally responsible as well, that what you're doing is investing in quality. So I would just add that for us, we knew this process was worthy of deep study, worthy of deep work, and worthy of deep engagement throughout. And that was the beginning launch of how did we do that work. And I would just say to people that I think there are a number of resources and places to support people in that work now. And when you're doing that work, you can study places like Ed Reports, right? Where they give you those foundational gateway pieces. But I said context because nobody can tell you what you need unless you live in your district. And so for us in Baltimore, we heard over and over again that families, teachers wanted to celebrate the richness and the culture and the uniqueness and beauty of Baltimore. So, as we adopted literacy curriculum, we knew we wouldn't get Baltimore specific literacy curriculum. So that drove us in some other places to bring about curriculum called Be More Me, for example, in social studies, where we could study some of those deeper pieces and really highlight that. So for us, I would just say, biggest piece of advice is you have to be a learner in the process at the same time you're being a leader. So, linking arms with friends and family and other places, we partnered up, Sumner County came to us after we had adopted in Baltimore, and we talked through the process, and they did things to do better than we did. So, I think sharing those stories, and I know, again, I'm just going to highlight, because there are case studies and different pieces. Ed Reports did a case study on Baltimore's engagement process. And we've had so many conversations with people about what that looks like. And then it's amazing to see how they add on to make it even better. So I think my piece of advice would be, don't go into it thinking you know what you're doing as a leader. You also have to learn as you're doing that work.
Yeah, Janise, and I'm glad you brought up Ed Reports and being a learner, because I was thinking the whole time about, it's so easy to go into something like Ed Reports and see like, oh, they're all green and they got the highest score. Why don't we just pick the one with the highest score? But that we really went deep into those, even what Ed Reports said, right? Like, how did they get those scores? What was it that was missing, or what needed to be strengthened? And we went deep in everything. But that's just one example.
And it's so important to know that like every material is not equal, right? Like all of those green light pieces, there are materials that go from, the standard of they feel like a basal-ish program that has met evidence-based criteria, but there's everything in the kitchen sink in there for teachers to teach. And then you go to ones that are, beautifully designed around a knowledge building curriculum with all of those coherent pieces, or the pieces around really identifying that early science, the science of reading, what does that look like? So, you have to think about it the same way like you go to buy a car, right? Every car has met the criteria for safety, for whatever, but you're not just going to walk in and grab, X brand at the first one you see. You really have to do some study around, hey, I've got kids. I need it to have these kinds of features in the back seat, and I need this to happen, and I need to think about that. So I think that's really important. And I would also, I'll do a plug too for the Curriculum Matters people. If you don't follow them, I think they're a great group of district leaders going through this work. And, I know Melissa and Lori always organize things. They can share the website. But really the idea with that group is cheerleaders and leaders coming together to think about how do you get through this process and learn together. So, Sumner County, Aldine, Texas, there's a million people in that group that are really thoughtful leaders to think about this work and learn and lean into one another. And
I know you have a lot to say about that, Janise, so thank you.
No, and Lori, I would just add, because I didn't say it, there's also a few webinars on there that are worth taking a visit. One around not all materials are created equal. So it'll go through that if you're in the process now to start thinking about where do you want to go and what do you want to do as Jean's district is working through.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janise. I'll link that in the show notes. I'll link the Curriculum Matters website and their social media, because I know they're super active on social.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jean, did you think of any advice during that time?
I mean, everything that Janise said.
Plus one.
There.
Perfect.
Done. Check. Plus one. Exactly. I mean, I think it's like, as someone going through the process right now, I mean, to me, and I think, Janise, you hit on this a little bit, you got to think about your teachers, and you have to think about your students, and you have to figure out a way to blend what you know is best for kids with what we know about the teachers and the students in our district. And I think just keeping that at the forefront is critical.
Exactly. Yeah. And I put in the chat, but podcaster listeners can't hear it. So I'm going to update my triangulation from content logistics and people to content logistics and resources, because resources can include people and time. And I feel like that really encompasses what you all are sharing.
You're going to have to actually create this triangle.
I'm going to have to create a graphic. I know.
Put it out there.
Not me. I'll just draw it on
100%.
chart paper. That's not me.
What? Be collaborative? Oh, thank you. See, you're really good at paraphrasing. So.
and creating infographics.
And creating infographics.
Next thing you know, she'll be making T-shirts, Jean, just so you know.
I have a Cricut machine, and do you guys know what a Cricut machine is? Yeah.
Get the triangle on a
you
T-shirt.
do your design. Send it to me.
Can
and
you
I'll
imagine
put it on a
everyone going
t-shirt
through
for
the
you.
RFP process, having this like big triangle, like RFP rules, with their.
You know what? I don't know that I don't know that it's a terrible idea, because I think when you're knee deep and you're going through all of the resources, it's so easy to get caught up in the content, and we just can't lose sight of why we're here, what matters, the kids, the students, to make all of our students readers.
Yeah. All right. Well, RFP rocks. Thank you for deconstructing that process for us.
All the procurement people in the world are dancing right
it.
now. They're so happy to hear people cheering RFPs, right? I love it.
I know, exactly. And a shout out to Fairfax. We have a lot of acronyms. So teachers, you can add that acronym to your list. We actually have a page of
That's
acronyms.
so funny. You're probably not alone. I bet there's a lot of people out there who are like, that resonates a lot.
Teachers
deeply
love
with
acronyms.
Me.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So to talk a little bit about the professional learning process. I mean, I could talk about this all day, because this is like the in and out of my job. But I think the most important thing to think about whenever we're thinking about the professional learning is, we know that we're going to be adopting high quality instructional materials. We don't know what yet, right? Because we're still in the RFP process. It's confidential. We can't share anything other than what I shared with you, and that we're in this process. And so we have to think about, like, what is it that our teachers need to know before they get the high quality instructional materials. And really what they need to know is this. They need this content knowledge. We've had teachers that have been like, I had no idea that there was a difference between phonics and phonological awareness, or that phonemic awareness was a subset of phonological awareness, and all this terminology. So what we've done in Fairfax is we think of the professional learning in 3 buckets. So we think of it as like admin and literacy leaders. So at a high level, like what does this need to look like at your school on the school level? And then we have our our literacy leaders. How are you able to coach up with your administration? How can you support individual teachers? And then we look at our teachers, and what do teachers need to know right now as far as this content? And so it's all parallel to each other. So for example, this year we were like, we really need to build content knowledge around oral language, why it's important, phonological awareness, why it's important, and phonics and why it's important. And so that looks a little bit different though for teachers than it does for literacy leaders, than it does for administrators, because they all have different lenses, but the through line is still the same.
Janise, I'm wondering if you wanted to add to that because I know Baltimore had some of the very same threads and through lines. So if you were going back to that time and thinking about how you planned to roll it out, we actually get a lot of questions from listeners, Janise, about that.
Sure.
How, we're in this process. We just adopted. What's great for professional learning? What do folks need to know? If you could share or elevate anything that you felt like was important and necessary for those buckets, and any like lessons learned that you feel like you might think help people out there listening.
Sure. So I think one thing was very similar to what Jean talked about, right? When we launched the process of readiness for adoption, we did a lot of work around readiness. So I talked a little bit earlier about the communication we did, but we also did professional learning around what is, the science of reading, right? So very, very similar to what Jean was talking about, why does it matter? And re-engaging people in the actual science. We were fortunate in Baltimore to have foundations for a number of years. But what we didn't couple with that was the why behind it. So people were, picking and choosing or saying, oh, my kid's got that, I'm going to skip this lesson. And then not realizing that impacted the trajectory a year later or 6 months down the road. So some of our readiness was very similar. We talked with our teachers. We worked with our teachers. We also really tried to elevate teacher voice in the work so that teachers could be telling us what they needed as the next step. So really, doing that readiness work. I would say as a district leader, the other part that our leadership team really embraced was continued study of what does that look like. So at the same time we were running the RFP and really thinking about that, we were running a plan for what does 3 years of learning look like in professional development. As Jean said, across all of those stakeholder groups. So we did the same. We had teachers, we had district-based literacy coaches. We had a position called an ACL, which was an academic content lead that worked with the folks too. And then we had them for our teachers. But for our leaders, but we also had them for our principal coaches and supervisors, right? Because what we wanted to make sure, and I think, I have lots of C words that are my favorite, but coherent is one of them. And really building a coherent design in a professional development sounds like it's easy, right? It's another t-shirt, but it is hard work to do, especially when you're trying to honor the developmental process that people also need to go through in the mind shift work. So for us, it was thinking about, and I think in Baltimore, we had a great example of this, right? Dr. Sonia Santelises, who is our CEO, is incredible. And she set from the agenda that she was a lead learner in this work, the same as a teacher was, right? This was year one for everybody, really understanding new curriculum, the design of the curriculum, the intentionality of the curriculum. So we spent a lot of time studying together, right? Our principal supervisors, our principals, our cabinet level folks were all walking and learning and leading from a space of inquiry to understand what was happening. It wasn't hey, the curriculum says you need to do, the launch component in 5 to 7 minutes and you were 10, so I'm writing you up, right? It was, what decisions did you make as a teacher to do XYZ? We at the time had partnered with the Standards Institute. And so we had some learning walk protocols we were using to really study, okay, this is exactly what we saw, right? So the folks that were visiting classrooms scripted it from minute 1 to minute 20. So we had different groups rotating in. The first 10 minutes were scripted by this group. Another group came in and scripted the next 10. And what it created was this amazing opportunity to look at 30 minutes of instruction and what the teacher moves were in that. And then what we did as a learning tool was we compared that to what the curriculum said and noticed where there were discrepancies, where there were time adjustments. And we just started talking to people. asking a teacher, why did you do that? Right? What did you may have substituted a worksheet that you wanted to use versus what the curriculum provided. Tell us why. And so we started to really build an understanding as a district into what that change was happening, and really elevating our teachers as leaders, as advocates for themselves to say, we need this. And so we really concentrated on teacher learning and then thought about how that played out to the rest of the strands. If a teacher needs this, a principal needs to understand this, a literacy coach needs this. And for us, we were really fortunate because we had a great partner alongside of us in our adoption process. Once we made the choice in Baltimore, Baltimore was able to leverage wit and wisdom through Great Minds for Literacy in K-8. And so, we partnered right up with them in the process, because as soon as we got to the decision of what our materials were, we launched right into deep professional learning with the partner. And here's a huge one. Like I say this all the time, the partner works for us, right? We're not hiring the partner to do our work. We're partnering with them to do the work in Baltimore. So we were fortunate to be able to say, okay, we understand this is your PD trajectory, but this is what we want. And so we were able to customize to be specific to that context piece I hit earlier in the development, in the training, in the feedback, and use that as a continuous improvement model. So we studied from our teachers and surveyed, did it really meet your needs? Or what do we need to do next? And I think as a leadership team, being transparent and vulnerable that you're learning in this too is just so important. Not just to say it, but to actually show it, believe it, and live it. And we got fortunate. I mean, we were blessed in Baltimore. We had a couple of amazing teachers that also just started tweeting everything they were doing. And that changed practice, right? Because a teacher's going to listen to the fourth grade teacher down the hall who's doing the same lessons and finding this, or our sixth grade teacher who was posting student work that generated a whole conversation in his own building about how did you change practice to get your kids to be writing like this. So I think leveraging all of those opportunities, and I'll just hit again that you have to be a learner in the process, right? There are other great resources. If folks don't know Rivet and their professional learning partnership guide, it's another gold mine, right? It is another space where you can go and see actually a list of all partners that can do and support this work, which is amazing. But also what's there is, how do you set up a professional learning development plan that is coherent, that is aligned, that is actually the same amount of time and worthy energy you're putting into teachers, you're putting into your district as a whole. So I think being able to think about those things at the same time, like, right, as Jean said, they don't have their material chosen yet, but they need to have a professional development plan. So when the material's chosen, what are those automatic onboarding things that have to happen? Because teachers have to know how to unpack the boxes. And God love all the HQIMs that come in pallets and boxes and boxes and boxes, right? Like, if you give those to a teacher and they have no idea why they need what they need, you have to figure those things out. So there are some transactional technical things that have to happen in the PD plan, but then you also have to think about that trajectory of learning that is critically important for you to get to the, integrity within the implementation and design of the program. So you can tell too, Jean, I share a little bit of that passion of PD with you, because I think, I always think about this and it's kind of funny, right? Because when we did the adoption process, it was like, oh my gosh. And Jean, I know you and I talked about this. It is so much work. And you think that's like the hard work. And then you get to the board and they approve and you get the materials in, and then you're like, oh my gosh, now we need to implement this, right? And so for me, I was talking to a friend the other day and I said, this is kind of like, look, I love the Ravens. I go to the football games. I know a lot about the sport. You could give me a new uniform. You could give me top of the line spikes. You could give me all of the things that equate to an HQIM. But if you put me on the field, I would have no idea what to do in a play, right? Because that, again,
you're not going to be Lamar.
No,
Janise.
I am no Lamar. I don't even think I could be like the guy that just passes the ball, right? Like the little center person who just hands you that. Guess what? There's strategy to that. There's decisions that you make. And Jean, you said it earlier, our teachers are not only the hardest working, but they're the people that have to make 60,000 decisions in 2 minutes on their feet. And so to equate that, we did great things. We gave Baltimore everything they needed in that K-8 platform. It was beautiful. It was pre-wrapped. It was coherent. It was everything. But what we owed them now was the support to know, how do you make a strategy decision? What's the playbook look like? But at the same time, you have to support people through that change management. So how do you help them? How do you design this? How do you give space to give feedback in the real work? So, again, I'm just going to push that as a district, you have to be a learner, and there are those resources out there for you to lean into.
You just made me so excited about where we're going and letting, when I'm thinking about the equitable access to literacy plan that we have in place in Fairfax County right now, we're starting that. We're starting to develop a PD plan for future phases. And we're thinking about all of the things that you just said. And I know that our leadership they're learners. We have some leaders in our district office who don't have a literacy background, who have embraced this change and have been like, all right, I'm going to read this. I'm going to look at this. And that's been so exciting to see, because they have math backgrounds, or they have, social studies backgrounds, or something different. And they're taking the time to learn. And so something I would just say that we used in our district was the book Shifting the Balance. And that book it's a really good gateway and entry point into learning, what is the science of reading, and what might that look like in my classroom? And I think by using that, we're using that with principals for a book study to help them to understand what to look for in classrooms. We're using that with literacy leaders to make sure that that they're able to really articulate with teachers, this is what you're doing. And then this is how you might make the shift and how it might look a little bit different. And I'm really excited about all of this for our district, because I think that's what you were saying, Janise. It's laying that groundwork, right? So we're building the content, it's the why. And it gives a lot of the research behind these shifts and why these shifts should happen, and how what we're doing before was not bad. I think that we just need to put that out there. I think people think teachers are oh, I wasn't doing the right thing. And the reality is we have more information now. And so here you go. And in this particular book, it's packaged well to help teachers.
And I just add one more thing? I think that is so important, right? The reason we're doing this is because every single student deserves every opportunity in front of them to be the best that they can. And it is our job to bring that equity into the materials, into the instruction, into the coaching, into the work of the district as a whole. So the equity work can't belong to an office, right? It's the real work every day that a teacher says and does. And I think that this professional learning journey is the most exciting thing that can happen in a district, because it is the concrete that puts it all together, right? I just got finished talking to two amazing districts in Sumner County in Tennessee is using swivel cameras to really use and look at the instruction that their teachers are doing in the live moment and provide feedback, right? Aldine, Texas is doing this at-bat rehearsal where they're taking their CKLA curriculum and they're really unpacking it. And then they're taking it and allowing teachers to practice with one another, right? So this idea about not just the learning part, but building advocacy and having teachers lead their own work is just ground changing. And I think, just brings the whole district to a new level. And it's empowering, right? It's empowering not just for teachers, but for our students, and hearing our students carry the message of how different their learning is and how excited they are when you talk to parents who say, oh, I know my kid's studying XYZ because of this. I just think it's such an amazing piece to really bring it into, you're getting ready into that exciting part, Jean, of the implementation now.
It is so exciting. And as I think about the high quality instructional materials and everything that you were just talking about, Janise, it really brings to the forefront for me that by adopting a high quality instructional material, we are laying this foundation for every single student to be getting just solid, good instruction. And then teachers, because they need to adapt it. Like you said, we had to adapt it for our district based on the population that we have in our district. If you have a class that's primarily ESOL, it might look a little bit different, but your starting place from that high quality instructional material, that it's good. It's good quality. It's high quality. It's evidence based, and you have a starting point, and that's equity, right there. And I would also just add, the high quality instructional materials, not only are they supportive of students, but they're supportive of teachers. We have teachers right now who they're planning an interactive read aloud, 3 small groups a day of reading mini lesson, of writing mini lesson, preparing for reading conferences, writing conferences. That's for language arts. And they still have to teach math, science, social studies, fill out field trip forms, send kids to the clinic, deal with all of the COVID procedure, right? Like, I was subbing last week and it was like, oh no, we can't eat next to each other because we have to be 6 feet apart. I don't even know. The kids know. It's what teachers are asked to do right now. This is just going to be such a gift for them. And, they can refine those lesson plans to meet the needs of their students. And I'm just so excited because I think that this is just it's just going to be so good for teachers. It's going to be so great for students. And it's also what our advocacy groups and our families have been asking for.
I'm really happy to hear that after this conversation, you're very excited and not scared. Because I know there was so much that was shared. I was like, I hope we're not overwhelming Jean. I hope
Jean's in it. She's already ready.
No. I'm excited. I think I shared with you guys in the pre-call, I just love Fairfax County. It really is such a great district. And I'm so excited that, we did the hard work looking at our structures that were in place and realizing that the structures we had in place were designed for the outcomes we were getting. And we're realizing that those aren't the outcomes that's not what we want. That's not what we can do. We owe it to our families and our students to have all students be able to learn to read no matter where they are.
Well said. I feel like we've given advice throughout this episode, so I'm not sure we should end with advice.
We specifically asked for advice throughout the episode.
We did, I know. So,
but I will say, think about if you have one last thing to say. But I just wanted to reiterate how exciting it is, the work that's happening in Fairfax, and also just in both cases, Baltimore and Fairfax, just how much you all took into account the teachers' voices. And I know it's ultimately about the students, but the teachers are the ones doing that hard work. And I think often it feels from a teacher's lens like the district chose a curriculum. They're telling me I have to do it. Now they're going to come in and make sure I do it. Right. And it just is really, really helpful to hear how you all did this to get the teachers' voices involved, but also, make sure that they understand the why behind making changes. And I just wanted to applaud you all for that amazing work that you did.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. I'll never turn up the moment of giving a last final word. So I'm going to roll. I changed my last final word from our pre-call. So I'm going to go with the C's.
Ooh. Surprise us.
Exactly. I've got a couple C's that I think are really important. So coherence is one in that design that we talked about, really being coherent from start to finish of planning for the RFP, the adoption process, the implementation, the continued work across. I think codification is really important. How do you capture both what you're trying to do and the lessons learned along the way? So making sure that the plan is available, as Jean talked about, having, version 3.0 is really important because that shows that you're looking at it. It shows the other C of continuous improvement, right? How are you studying what's happening and what happens along that process and moves you through there? And I think another C is collaboration. So building that community in your district, but I think it's also learning outside of your district. So we talked about this, right? Collaborating with people like Melissa and Lori love literacy because you've got experts that are coming to the work. You've got folks like Susan Lambert and the Science of Reading podcast that she has. You also have other experts in other districts. So people like Curriculum Matters that are bringing that work together. We talked about Ed Reports, Rivet, all of those great resources. And then I'll end with not a C, but an L. Being a learner, right? Leaning into this process and being a learner as you go. I can't tell you how much I grew just in the process of adoption, implementation, and the work, even though I had been leading that work for a number of years in Baltimore. So it was such a gift to be able to go deep and learn from the experts around us that were our teachers, our students, our leaders. So just again, thanks for having us be able to talk about this because I think it's super exciting. And Jean, I envy you being in the seat where you are to be able to jump back into this work and lead through it.
I'm so excited. Thank you. And I would add one other C, Janise, for advice, core values. When you know your core values, and students come first. And I think parents would say that, the school board would say that, school leaders would say that, teachers would say that, then there's no question about whether you're doing the right thing or not.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Those
they
were
had
wonderful.
Great advice.
See, I'm glad we wrapped it up with coherence, codification, collaboration, core values, and
learning.
Learning. Wonderful. Thank you both for being here and for doing this with us today. We are so excited for listeners to hear this podcast. It's going to be a game changer for anyone who's in the RFP process, adoption process, and stepping into the implementation space. So thank you both.
Thanks.
And Jean, you'll have to keep us updated on what happens after the RFP process.
I will. Yes, I will. I know. It's like, what's going to happen?
I was thinking after Janice's car metaphor, I was like, it's kind of like a pregnancy. You're like doing all this work and then
surprise, right?
Once you have the baby, you have to do the work.
The best.
We could keep coming up with metaphors all day long. Right. So stop us now.
Right, but it is. But the work never ends, right? Like after the pregnancy, you have the baby, and then you're like,
more work.
And every stage is exciting.
That's a great way to look along the way. That's right.
Some literacy BFFs. I love it. Have a really good day. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you for listening, literacy lovers. Remember, we have a new episode out every Friday, and we send a super helpful newsletter with follow-up content each Tuesday.
Be sure to visit our website to subscribe to our newsletter and podcast. It's literacypodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Literacy Podcast.
And please reach out with questions or ideas for podcast episodes. We love hearing from you. Melissa, what's our email address?
Melissa and Lori at literacypodcast.com.
We are so glad you're here to learn with us.